Good evening. My name is John H. and I am an alcoholic. Welcome to the Code Blue Big Book Action Seminar. What we're going to do in this seminar, guys, is we're going to go through the first 164 pages of our big book, our Guide to Freedom, and we're going to do exactly what it says. I myself am no big book guru. I am no spiritual wonder man. I'm just a simple drunk who was almost dead from the disease when a couple recovered alcoholics took me through the book. I did the work, and it saved my life. Now, as a result of that, I try to pass on what has been so freely given to me. Now, I borrow heavily from the Joe and Charlie Big Book Weekend tapes. I borrow heavily from that smartass Clancy. I borrow from Chuck C. I borrow from all of the giants who have gone before me. So please, get yourself a big book, large print I prefer, a highlighter and a pen, and bring your willingness. Get ready to change your life. Thanks for listening. Good evening, I'm John Alcoholic.
John.
During the 1950s, a man by the name of Max C., now dead, started a group in Winnipeg, Manitoba called the Golden Slippers. The group was a back to the basics of the big book kind of group, especially for those people who could not stay sober for any length of time. The group took a bunch of chronic slippers and walked them through the steps, taking the action exactly as laid out by the first 100 men and women who wrote the basic textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not your typical thanks for sharing kind of AA meeting, nor is it like any seminar. Participants are asked to do all 12 steps as laid out in our basic textbook. One or more of the people who have been through this before will be guides to lead you through the instructions in our basic textbook using a dictionary published at about the same time as the book Alcoholics Anonymous to help us better understand the directions as they were written by the first 100 men and women. We ask every participant to commit to the entire process. Though we read and study the AA Big Book, this group is not limited to members of AA. We who have participated in these groups before have come to understand that these sessions make us much better sponsors. We can now lead people through the steps exactly as given to us by those who have gone before, unfettered and unchanged. In addition to being a boot camp for sponsors, we also feel this is especially valuable to those who have been through some sort of treatment or rehab and have been, in effect, left off at 3 or 5. Recovery requires that we do all 12 steps. We recover in AA by taking the steps, and if we don't take the action as described in our basic textbook, we probably won't recover. These study and action sessions will guide you through the steps precisely as the first 100 men and women laid them down. These are back to the basic sessions, accepting the simple kit of spiritual tools that's been laid at our feet. Let's open with the set-aside prayer. God, please let me set aside everything I think I know about sobriety, life, and you, so that I may be open to a new experience. Peace. All right. Okay, well, welcome everybody. I know that last week I don't know if, I did run a few columns. I just want to make sure that everybody knows on the hurts and the harms that we've done other people. You know, the main part of it was the sex inventory, because we seem to harm people more there than in any other arena. I think money is probably a close second. But I just want to make sure everybody understands, my mom was on the list because, worried her to death. Lied to her, stole from her. My dad, the same thing. Employers, I didn't give them everything I could. And stole from employers. Employees, when I was at half my usual ability, I put them in a bad way. I stole from other employees being in commission. My brothers and sisters, treated them badly. I didn't show up for things. Nieces and nephews, not there for birthday parties. There's a whole lot of hurts and harms, and we run those columns exactly the way that we did for the resentments and the fears, right? So, just keep working on it. We won't be meeting next week. So if everybody, man, try to get your 5th step done before 2 weeks from next Tuesday. It really works. If you guys, I promise you, even if you've been sober a long time, if you do another one, you get it done and we move on to step 6 and 7 in 2 weeks, you'll see the progression and it's really going to help you out. In Code Blue, I always lose a lot of people, obviously. I mean, I know a lot of them, a lot of people I put on there for chronic relapsers, and unfortunately, chronic relapsers relapse. That's what they do. But I also lose a lot of people right around the fourth step, because the fourth step, I think a lot of it is fear. It scares people, and I know there's also confusion, and maybe it's also, laziness. I remember when I was doing my fourth step, the first time I was doing my fourth step, I would find all kinds of things that I could do so I didn't have to work on my fourth step, right? I mean, I would vacuum, I would clean the bathroom, I would work out, I'd go to the gym twice a day, not one, right? I'd go shopping. I mean, I would do anything. I had the cleanest apartment on earth, But eventually, they said, when they said, make your appointment to do the fifth step, I had been working on it, but when I made the appointment, and I had like a week or 8 days until that appointment, I worked on it every night, for at least an hour, and I mean, I got that thing done. And I mean, I honestly think people can get this done in 4 or 5 hours, if you just sit alone quietly. 5 years ago, roughly 5 years ago, there were 3 of us doing a Code Blue up at the Brooklyn Park Alano. And we had anywhere from 9 months to 2 years sober, the 3 of us that were doing it. And we didn't know what the hell we were doing, right? But we were trying. We were going through the book and doing what the people had showed us to do. And I think we started out with 10 or 12 people. And I mean, it was funny because by the time we wrapped up that Code Blue session, there were 3 of us, there was a table in front with the 3 of us, and there was 1 guy left, right? Now, this guy, though, he came to every single session, and he did all of the stuff, right? And I mean, he gave me a big hug and gave us all a big hug, and then I didn't see him, right? I did not see him. I saw him 2 years later. And he just came up to me and he gave me a big hug. He said, man, I can't thank you enough because that Code Blue changed my life, And I think, of course, what it was he found his higher power, and his higher power changed his life. But he found it through the working of the 12 steps. And this guy was about to get divorced. He did end up saving his marriage. He was 55 years old, by the way, when he sobered up. This guy saved his marriage, and he had been working a union job his whole life, and just horrible resentment and anger. He left that job and got a different job at like age 56. And I mean, he just said, none of this would have been possible if I hadn't have gone through that thing and worked these steps. So, and I was like, and of course I felt pretty silly at the time, 1 guy, but you know what? That's a victory, man. That's a win. So, I know people are going to drop out. If I can even just get a couple of you to do the 5th step, and hopefully all of you, that's a big victory for me. I quit drinking hundreds of times, right? Maybe thousands. And for me, it was always the same. I would go to a lot of meetings, and it was if I had a spring in my chest, right? I'd be on about day 6, right? And maybe I'd get in an argument with my boss. That little spring. I'd go home, I'd get in an argument with my girlfriend. I wouldn't get that deal at work. And all of these things would, until that spring would finally bust, and I would go out and I would get drunk, right? And I always thought that I was the victim. Everybody was taking advantage of me, and I was the guy that was getting the shaft. Damn it, And boy, when the first time I went through and did the 4th and 5th step, I saw that, I made the mess that I was in. I wasn't a victim. I blamed everybody else, but I was the architect of my own life. I was the architect of all of the things that were going on in my life, and I mean, it was quite an eye opener. When I first looked at the steps, when I first was really going to go through them, I thought that they looked as if they were designed to punish me, right? But you know what? They're not. They're designed to save our lives. A person whose mind is filled with resentment, a person whose mind is filled with fear, a person whose mind is filled with guilt, shame, and remorse does not feel good. We don't feel good, man. And for me, I always thought about the ease and comfort that would come from taking just a couple of drinks, right? And then I would start drinking and I would end up drunk all over again. I only thought about taking my life when I was not drunk, but rather when I was hungover, or when I was in little periods of sobriety between my drunks. When I was drunk, I never thought about taking my life, because my perception changed enough where I could stand the way that my life was for that little bit of time that I was drunk. But when I woke up hungover the next day, and even if I didn't drink the day after that, that's when I thought about the only way out of this mess is to kill myself, right? So the steps, and this is a big one, the fourth and the fifth step, they are designed to relieve the pressure, that spring, right? And at first the steps make life bearable without drinking. Then they make life tenable, right? Able to be maintained or defended against attack. And eventually the steps make life preferable to my life when it was drinking. And I got to tell you, life keeps getting better and better. After the fourth step, we're going to know the nature of our wrongs to talk about with somebody in God in step 5. We're going to know the defects of character that will become ready to have God remove in 6. We're going to have the shortcomings we'll ask Him to take away in 7. And we've got the list of names for 8 and 9, right? And again, this is not scary. There's nothing to fear. Our book says that God is starting to give me a kindly and tolerant view of people, right? Which is something I never had. And God is starting to remove my fears and show me what He would have me be. Right, and I never what does that mean? Show me what you would have me be. Shouldn't you show me what you would have me do? And it's show me what He would have me be. Because if I can manage to be, my character defects in column 4, which is no longer up there, but if I can be less dishonest, less selfish, less self-seeking and frightened, and less inconsiderate, if I can be the opposite of those things, then I'm going to probably react a lot better in any situation. So it's, what would you have me be? I mean, if I can be patient, tolerant, kind, respectful, I'm probably going to do the right thing. And I'm not going to be stepping on toes and getting into all kinds of trouble like I did when I was drinking. So step 4 and 5 is a must. It's a must. We cannot take steps 5 through 9 without first doing 4. And, they say that the steps are suggested, but, the bad news is we ain't got anything else. So if you don't want to do them, best of luck. You can run from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to try to stay away from the bottle, but eventually it's going to catch up with you like it did me. And for people that haven't, and there's people there. There's one guy that's not here tonight that was honest with me on Sunday morning. He said he hasn't been doing much. If we can even just do 10 of our worst resentments, 10 of our worst fears, and 10 of our worst harms that we've ever done, and run through those columns and write the summaries, that's going to be a big chunk, right? That's going to be a big chunk. When I did my 5th step, the way I did it the first time and actually the second time, I started out, I can't remember if I gave them a 10 to 15 minute bio of myself, or if I jumped right into the top 10 things that I was the most ashamed of that I'd ever done in my life. I think I might have jumped right into the 10 worst things I'd ever done because I wanted to get them out. And then I gave them a little bit of a biography of my life. And then we went through all my sheets with my resentments, and I read my summaries, and we looked at why I did the things that I did. And it was at the time it didn't feel like much, but boy, it had a very profound effect on me as time went by. The top 10 things that I did, my top 3, I can share them now. One of them was an act of cowardice. I was so drunk I could barely walk. I was in college up at St. John's, and I stumbled into this guy who was about 6'8". He was a basketball player, and I said something to him. I mean, I was so blind and drunk I could barely see. I said, "God damn it, I could beat the hell out of you!" And of course, the guy's 3 times my size, and he was going to come in at me and beat the hell out of me. And a guy stepped in front of me. and said, "Hey man, relax," and then he beat the hell out of that guy. And I was so drunk, I stood there and watched it, and that ate my lunch for years, man. You know, and talking about that with my sponsor. The other thing that was horrible, I was with a guy. It was my crack dealer's father-in-law. He was dying of cirrhosis of the liver. And we were smoking crack one night, just me and him, and I stole some drugs from him and helped him look for it, right? That one killed me. Another one was picking up this married woman with young children at a bar, and everybody saw us and took her home. I'm sure I destroyed her marriage. And I had 7 other ones just like that I wanted. And I can talk about them today. They still hurt, but you know what, man? I did them, and I have to face them. And I know that never again in my life am I ever going to do anything like that ever again. But I got those out, the bio, and then we went through the resentments, we went through the fears, and we went through the harms. And again, it just had a profound effect. So 2 weeks from tonight, get your 5th step done. Get a 12 and 12 if you don't have one. I might have a few I can bring in for sale, but pick up a 12 and 12 because we're going to be doing 6 and 7 out of the 12 and 12. So speaking of which, you don't need to look at yours. I'm going to read just a little bit about step 5 out of the 12 by 12 before we get going in the big book. All of AA's 12 steps ask us to go contrary to our natural desires. They all deflate our egos. When it comes to ego deflation, few steps are harder to take than 5, but scarcely any step is more necessary to long-time sobriety and peace of mind than this one. We've got to do it or we're going to drink. We're going to see that it tells us 5 times in the book what's going to happen to us. AA experience has taught us we cannot live alone with our pressing problems and the character defects which cause or aggravate them. My top 10 things, they ate me alive, man. I had to drink so I didn't have to think about them. We have swept the searchlight of step 4 back and forth over our careers, and it has revealed in stark relief those experiences we'd rather not remember. If we have come to know how wrong thinking and action have hurt us and others, then the need to quit living by ourselves with those tormenting ghosts of yesterday gets more urgent than ever. We have to talk to somebody about them. A little further along it says, if AA's experience means anything at all, this is not only unwise, but it is actually a perilous resolve. They're talking about not doing it. Few muddled attitudes have caused us more trouble than holding back on step 5. Few muddled attitudes have caused us more trouble than holding back on step 5. Some people are unable to stay sober at all. He's telling us again. Others will relapse periodically until they really clean house. Well, that explains why I kept getting drunk time after time, because I never did it. Even AA old-timers sober for years often pay dearly for skimping this step. They will tell how they tried to carry the load alone, how much they suffered of irritability, anxiety, remorse, and depression. If you get sober, I don't want to live that way. And how unconsciously seeking relief, they would sometimes accuse even their best friends of the very character defects they themselves were trying to conceal. Right? That's the you spot it, you got it thing. They always discovered that relief never came by confessing the sins of other people. Everybody had to confess his own. Right? That's like the guy in AA who said, I've taken 100 inventories in AA, but not one of them was mine, right? We sit there and we look at other people in our home group. Look at that guy, right? But we don't do our own. What are we likely to receive from step 5? For one thing, we shall get rid of that terrible sense of isolation we've always had. For me, I could be in a room full of people, and I could be in a room full of AA people, and there was me, and there was everybody else, man. I'm over here, and I'm apart from, I'm not a part of. I'm isolated from everybody, even when I'm with other people. Almost without exception, alcoholics are tortured by loneliness. Even before our drinking got bad and people began to cut us off, nearly all of us suffered the feeling that we didn't quite belong, right? When we reached AA and for the first time in our lives we stood among people who seemed to understand, the sense of belonging was tremendously exciting. We thought the isolation problem had been solved, but we soon discovered that while we weren't alone in a social sense, we still suffered many of the old pangs of anxious apartness, right? So step 5 was the answer. It was the beginning of true kinship with man and with God. So a little bit out of the 12 and 12. So get one of these. And couple more things. The other thing that happened for me when I did the 5th step, they say that this is a disease of perception. This is a disease of perception. I could not see the truth of things as they really were, right? Or as they really are. Remember the 2 acronyms, fuck everything and run, and forgot everything's all right, right? When I 6 years ago, when I got out of detox and I went back to work, they took me back to work, and I was like, oh my God, thank you for taking me back after what I did. Oh, I'm so happy to have this job. You guys are wonderful. I'm going to work so hard for you, right? Let's flash forward about 3 or 4 months. My self-will is coming back, and guess what I'm thinking? I'm thinking, these bastards are taking advantage of me. I'm working my ass off, and I'm smarter than all of these guys. I'm doing this and that. So, it just took a couple of months for me to change my thinking and not to see the truth as they really were, right? So thank God we have sponsors, right? No matter what you're thinking, don't you quit that job, right? Don't you quit no matter what you're thinking. Or sometimes when I might have done something to somebody, my sponsor says, you treated that person badly. You go over there and you make amends to that person. And I'll say, well, the hell I treated them badly. They screwed me, right? And he would say, well, it doesn't matter what they did. You go over there and you make amends, right? And I didn't understand it, but it's actions first, right? Actions and steps first, and then our mind is going to follow. We do the steps, we do the actions, we're going to act ourselves into better thinking and better living. So we've got to go to meetings, we've got to seek counsel with our sponsor, we've got to do the steps, and then our thinking is going to get better, right? Our thinking will get better, and then how we relate to people in the physical world is also going to get better. So when I perceive the world wrongly, my emotions build up, they build up, they build up. The world and people don't treat me right. Things are going crazy, and it's something as simple as a flat tire could push me over the edge, right? And I mean, it's insane. So I've been perceiving myself, I was a victim my whole life, right? Over and over and over. It's their fault, it's their fault. And things would build up and I would snap. John, you just got your job back. You just reassembled your friends and your family. Why did you ruin it all by yet another spree, right? You don't have a job. Your family's disgusted. You crashed your car. You're in jail. What's going on here? And the thing that pushed me over the edge might have been the flat tire. And so, I said, well, Mom, I got a flat tire. It's like, what? Right? So, that wasn't it at all. It was just things building up. So, when I drink, by the way, my perceptions change. And just for a couple of hours, I can handle everybody and everything for about 2 hours. Until I get a little bit too drunk. Then I black up and I wake up and I got all those problems back again, right? So this is the beginning of seeing the truth of things as they really are, right? The truth of things as they really are. If I can learn to be a little bit less selfish, a little bit less dishonest, a little bit less fearful and inconsiderate, I will not have to fear and resent, and I won't have to step on the toes of my fellows to protect something that really doesn't need protecting, or to get something that I really don't need, right? Or to want to appear to be somebody that I'm not, and I really don't need to be that way anyways, right? When we experience fear, the one question we've got to ask ourselves is, what's not going my way? Yeah, right? Because when we're afraid, something's not going our way. And something inside of us is going to say that we have got to act. We have got to act in order to save ourselves, and that's not true. Because, remember, we forgot everything's all right. So we pause, we pray, we call our sponsor. And all of the wisest men and women, the greatest spiritualists in the world, the greatest gurus, the best AA sponsors, the greatest entrepreneurs, right? They all say the same thing. Before you make a decision and do something, you seek counsel from others, right? Before you act. Because you might not be seeing the truth of things as they really are. And thank God for this. We have spiritual instructions in our book, and thank God, because I'm a hothead. And I need these spiritual instructions every day, because if I didn't have them, I'd probably get fired. God knows what would happen. But if I can see the truth of things that they really are, and I can pause and I can ask counsel, I'm going to be okay. Because remember, resentments are incorrect judgments of other people, not getting my way in the past. Fears are incorrect perceptions. I'm afraid I won't get my way in the future, right? The harms and the hurts we do are incorrect treatment of others, right? Because we can't see the truth. And anxiety is not getting my way now. So, I work in a Shark Tank commission sales environment. And when I first did my 4th and 5th step, and I started to work, it was actually kind of funny, because I could see, I was watching, I was like out of body, and I'd watch myself, at the end of the day. I go, like your selfishness, your dishonesty. And it was like I was looking at somebody else and laughing, but it was me. But I got to see these things, and when I made mistakes, I went and I fixed them quickly. And eventually, rather than making the mistakes, I could catch myself before I did the wrong things. And that's something that took me practice, right? So now I can catch myself before I do that stupid thing, and then I don't have to go and make an amend to somebody. So it just gets better. But this is the beginning of seeing things as they really are. So saved my life. So let's go to into action. They call this into action, not into thinking. Right? When we think, we drink, right? Page 72, into action. Having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? Underline the next 2 lines. We have been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator. Just underline that, and next to it write, don't have it yet. We don't have it yet, right? Particularly if this is the first time through the steps. In step 2 it said came to believe, right? That there's something greater than ourselves. So now we're trying to get an actual relationship with this greater power, right? And to discover the obstacles in our path. Underline the next 6 words. We have admitted certain defects. Next to that, write 4th column. On all those sheets that we did, hopefully that we did, that those are the defects. The selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, fearful, and inconsiderate. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We have put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Underline weak items in our personal inventory, because that's the 4th column as well. Now these are about to be cast out. Underline the next 6 words again. This requires action on our part. Right? Action is the magic word in AA. If we don't take the actions, we're not going to get better. Which, when completed, will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, underline, the exact nature of our defects. And again, write 4th column next to that. They're talking about that 4th column that we got all those check marks in next to. This brings us to the 5th step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. This is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. We think we have done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. There is doubt about that. Highlight the next sentence. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. So they're telling us, when we just think about things and we don't put stuff down on paper, we're still going to think that we're the victim. We're still going to think that we're getting shafted. We might still, I thought until I got this stuff on paper, I thought I was a pretty good guy. Sure, I did some things to people, but they had it coming, right? So my self-appraisal did me nothing. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We will be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. Okay, so we're going to put a 1 in front of this. This is the first reason. The best reason, and underline the next two lines. The best reason first, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. So highlight that and put a 1 next to it. They're telling us point blank that if we don't do it, we might not overcome drinking. Now, off to the left, we're going to write something. We're going to write, if I am not honest, I will not have a healthy recovery. If I am not honest, I will not have a healthy recovery. I'm at the point now in my life where, if I've got something, that I've done something, or if something's bothering me, I do not feel good until I discuss it with somebody, and if I've done something wrong, I fix it. That little something deep inside me now, I just can't live that way anymore. If I am not honest, I will not have a healthy recovery. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they have turned to easier methods. Okay, highlight the next 5 words. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Put a 2 next to that. That's the second reason we better do our 5th step. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they highlight the next 4 words, wondered why they fell. Put a 3 next to that. That's the third reason. And by falling, we're either going to go back to drinking, or we're going to do something catastrophic and sabotage our lives. We're going to highlight the next 5 lines. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. You can stop highlighting there. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty. Circle those 3 words. In the sense, we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story, and underline all their life story. So here's where people get into trouble, right? They think that the 4th step is telling somebody all their life story, and that's not it at all. It's not a biography. When I was a kid, I had resentments coming into my head as a child, right? When I was a kid, I had horrible fears. I remember my first day to kindergarten. My dad, back then, I guess it was a little safer than today, but my dad pointed, he said, the school's over there, go walk. I mean, I was terrified. I was harming people. So all our life story, it's my life story as regards to my resentments that I've had my whole life. It's my life story in regards to the fears that I've had my whole life. And it's my life story in regards to the hurts and the harms that I've done other people, right, my whole life. This is not a biography, because I know where I was born. I know where I moved. I know what jobs I had. That stuff is just going to mask what's really wrong with me, right? So it's my life story, resentment, fear, and harms wise, right? And again, when we do this the way the Big Book tells us, 95% of this crap is going to disappear, man. And the other 5%, prayer is the ultimate weapon. Prayer and work with our sponsor. And some people go to psychiatrists, psychologists, and that's absolutely fine as well. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He is very much the actor. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. So next to that, write self-seeking. Self-seeking. And there's a lot of definitions of self-seeking. One of them I like is, I want you to think I'm somebody I'm not, right? I mean, that's one of them. I always like to put myself first. What I want matters more than what you want. There's a lot of them. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. Coming to his senses, he is revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension. That makes for more drinking. Underline that makes for more drinking and put a 4 next to that. It's a 4th reason. They're telling us again that we're going to go back to drinking. Psychologists are inclined to agree with us we have spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but few instances where we have given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. Unless willing to be honest, circle honest, with these sympathetic men, we were honest, circle honest, with no one else. Small wonder many in the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics and their chance for recovery. So you guys don't have to go there, but I'm going to quickly go back to page 58. And it tells us, usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves, right? They will not be able to grasp this simple program. They are the cannots, right? They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. So, we alcoholics, you can't be a successful alcoholic as long as some of us have been, without knowing how to lie, without knowing how to con, without knowing how to cheat. And when we do these things, we have a conscience, right? And the guilt, shame, and remorse that we would feel would kill us. But what we do is we use resentments, right? Whenever we do something to another person, we use our resentments to transfer all blame to the other person. That way we can live with ourselves. So we're being dishonest with ourselves among all else, right? Because when I'm angry at somebody, well, they had that coming. They had it coming and they got more, so I'm going to give it to them again, right? When I got that going around in my head, I don't have to feel the guilt and shame over what I did, right? So we use these resentments and we're dishonest with ourselves. We're going to highlight the whole next sentence here, but don't turn the page. We must, circle must, be entirely honest with somebody. Okay, underneath somebody, right? Not everyone. Just one person, right? There, one of my sponsors said, if I ever die, you better share all your secrets with somebody else, because there should be somebody walking the face of the earth that knows absolutely everything about you, right? Because you want that person, if you're in trouble and you need somebody to call that's going to give you the truthful answer, you would better have that person. So we must be entirely honest with somebody, not everyone, if we expect to live long or happily in this world. So circle that and write number 5. That's the 5th reason. If we want to live long or happily in this world, we had better do our 5th step, right? Now, by the way, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, when we do the 5th step, we really want somebody that's done this work and knows the program well. Because if confession was enough, and I'll admit the first time I heard somebody's 5th step, I didn't really know enough. I wish I could redo it with the person. I mainly listened. But confession is for absolution. The 5th step is for recovery. Write that at the top of the page. Confession is for absolution. 5th step is for recovery. And I always say that confession is for absolution. 5th step is for recovery. If confession was enough to keep us sober, there wouldn't be any alcoholic priests. There wouldn't be any alcoholic practicing Catholics. I don't know if other religions have confession. I know I was brought up Catholic. But confession did not seem to do the job for us, right? So we've got to do the 5th step if we are to recover, right? Rightly and naturally, underline to confidential step. We think well before we choose the person or persons with whom to take this intimate and confidential step. So next to that, let's write first instruction of 5th step. First instruction of 5th step. So we're going to think about this. We want to make sure we have somebody that we like what they've got. We can trust them. We respect them. We admire them. And we think they can help us. Those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, circle must, and of course will want to go to the properly appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. right? So these are obviously more instructions here. So like me, for example, even though I was born a Catholic and they made me go to church, I am not a practicing Catholic and I haven't been for years. So I don't belong to a religious denomination, so I'm not gonna do it with a priest or somebody. But if you are practicing in some religion, Bill is telling us right here that you should do it with them as well. Though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk with somebody ordained by an established religion. Right? He told us earlier that we cannot scoff at these people. We often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. Of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. If we cannot or would rather not do this, we search our acquaintance for a circle, closed-mouthed, put a 1 by that, understanding, put a 2 by that, friend. So 2 more characteristics that we want when we're selecting somebody to hear our 5th step. Somebody who is closed-mouthed and somebody who's understanding. Now, if you've got somebody that's running around AA and you see this person and they just love to gossip about everything, right? Maybe they're not the best person to hear our 5th step. Maybe they're better suited to showing up early and setting up chairs and giving rides and things of that nature. Right? Because for this one, we need somebody who can hold their water close to the vest. Perhaps our doctor or psychologist will be the person. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. It may be one of our own family, but we cannot disclose anything to our wives or parents which will hurt them and make them unhappy. We have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. Such parts of our story we tell to someone who will understand yet be unaffected. The rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. So after others, write rigorous honesty. Actually, next to that, the whole paragraph. And you can write more instructions. These are more 5th step instructions. And they're getting in a little bit to the 9th step here, right? We've always got to be hard on ourselves, but considerate of others. So we're not going to let slip something that might cause pain or harm to another person. Now remember, when this book came out, the book went out to California, and the first guy that got the book out there was no AA meetings. So this guy is going through the book, right, doing things, and he's got no meetings where he can say, hey, will you be willing to hear my 5th step? So a lot of these instructions that they're talking about finding somebody are not necessarily true today as they were back then. I mean, this book went all over the country to people who were the first ones to get their hands on it. So they didn't have wonderful AA members who had done this work before them like we do now. So I don't know. I'm a firm believer that if you've got an AA sponsor, you should do it with that AA sponsor, because they have to know who you are. When you're talking about things and maybe decisions you have to make and things like that. So I firmly believe that you do this with your AA sponsor, and if you do have somebody else you want to do with it, that's okay too. Both of the sponsors that I've had in my life, they all required me to do it with them, right? Notwithstanding the great necessity for discussing ourselves with someone, it may be one is so situated that there is no suitable person available. Okay, underline the next 3 lines. If that is so, this step may be postponed only, however, if we hold ourselves in complete readiness to go through with it at the first opportunity. Right? You can write more instructions. And again, today we don't have that excuse, I don't think. We say this because we are very anxious that we talk to the right person. It is important that he be able to keep a confidence, that he fully understand and improve what we are driving at, that he will not try to change our plan. Underline the next sentence and circle must, but we must not use this as a mere excuse to postpone. Right? So we've got to get this done. So at the top of the page, we're going to write, move from self-centered to God-centered. Arrow, new life. Move from self-centered to God-centered, arrow, new life. Move from self-centered to God-centered, arrow, new life. So, gosh, in the past whenever I would make decisions, before I work these steps, well, how is this going to affect me? Well, how can I benefit from this? Well, who's going to take care of old John here, right? So now what I try to think about is, well, what are the program principles? What do I think that my higher power would want me to do, right? How should I be, right? And so this is a totally new way of thinking for me, right? Instead of thinking of myself first on every little thing. And being a commissioned salesman, even more so, I think, right? And then highlight the next line. When we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. Right? So again, these are just more instructions. We have a written inventory, and we are prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we are about to do and why we have to do it. He or she should realize that we are engaged, underline, upon a life and death errand. So underline those, 6 words. This literally is a life and death errand. I mean, if we don't do it and we start drinking again, we're certainly going to die well before our time. But you know what? We might get in an accident. We might end up taking out some other people with us. We might end up hanging ourselves in a garage. We might end up putting a bullet in our head. Our liver might. There's so many. This is a life and death errand, and a lot of times we forget that in this nice club that we come to, right? But people are dying of this disease all over the place. Just pick up any newspaper and read it. Another guy, DWI, died and killed somebody else, just the other day. Next to upon life and death errand, you can write 2 hours is enough. That's from my sponsor, right? The first guy that was running the Code Blue I went through. He said that if we do the 4-step, the way that we do it in Code Blue, he said generally, and he's heard a lot more 5th steps than me, he said generally 2 hours is going to do it. Because again, 95% of the stuff we get it done, we see how ridiculous it is. We don't feel the need to share it with our sponsor, but we're gonna be talking about the big ones and the things of that nature with our sponsor. But both of the ones that I did and all of the ones that I've heard were between 2 and 3 hours. So most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. If anybody ever asks me, to hear their 5th step, now of course I'm a self-centered, selfish alcoholic. So the first thing I think is, God damn it, I don't have the time, right? But then all of a sudden, after that goes through my head, I'm like, this would be, of course I'll do it. It would be wonderful, because whenever I do it, guess what? I get to see deeper into myself, and I get to grow spiritually as well as helping somebody. So it's not only an honor, but it's also a growth experience. Underline the next 2 lines. We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Okay, just underline that. And again, obviously, that's telling us that we are going to be rigorously honest. We're going to talk about everything. So we're going to label this whole next paragraph here has the 5th step promises. Everybody talks about the 9-step promises, and those are the ones that get read in the meetings. But I got to tell you, man, these 5th step promises, I like these even better, because these all came true for me, and they showed me that I was indeed on my way to having a new life, and it was possible for me to live without alcohol and drugs, right? Because these things happen. So we're going to label 8 promises. You can write 5th step promises next to the paragraph we're about to read. Once we have taken this step withholding nothing, put a 1 in front of we. We are delighted. I don't know if I was so delighted that it was over or I was delighted, but I got to tell you, I was very, very happy when I was done with it. Put a 2 in front of we. We can look the world in the eye. I mean, I had some things the second time I was about to do my fifth step, the day before, I remembered something I had done in a blackout. And I said, that's it, man. There's no recovery for me. God's not forgiven me, man. I might as well just go get drunk right now. But I immediately called my sponsor, and he talked me off the ledge. And when we talked about it, he told me something that he had done that was very similar, if not worse. And he said, don't you realize that God sees what you're doing right now? And God forgives you, and God wants you to succeed and get healthy so you can help others. Don't you see that? And, all of a sudden I could look people in the eye, right? So that's a wonderful when we can look the world in the eye. Put a 3 in front of we. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Man, I could not trust myself. Whenever I was alone, the committee in my head would start to go ballistic. All these voices, all of these worries about what happened to me and all the fears about what was going to happen, and I just could not shut them off. I didn't want to be alone. Now, guess what, man? I love being alone with no TV or anything. I love being by myself, and I can be at peace and ease, and it was never that way. Put a 4 in front of our. Our fears fall from us, right? Remember that fear prayer. Please remove my fears and show me what you would have me be. Our fears start to go, all these crazy fears that aren't real start to go away, right? I'm still afraid of heights, but all my stupid ones are going away. If I live by the principles, I don't have to worry about a lot of things. Put a 5 in front of we. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. Right? My prayer started to take on a little bit new meaning, my prayer and meditation. Put a 6 in front of we. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. So right here, we are getting closer to more than just belief that something might happen. Put a 7 in front of the feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. Okay, so that one is a promise, and one of my mentors said that's also a warning. That's also a warning. And he told me about many people that felt so tremendously wonderful after the fifth step that they did not feel they had to go further. They didn't go further with 6, 7, 8, and 9. And he tells me how eventually they drank again. So he said, but we've got to go further, right? We got to keep working these. We got to go through all the steps. And then put an 8 in front of we. We feel we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Remember that isolation, that horrible loneliness that we all feel. Again, now we're a part of instead of apart from. So wonderful fifth step promises. So underline the next 2 lines. And again, this is another fifth step instructions. We've done a lot of work, so they're going to let us relax for a while. Returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, right? Carefully reviewing what we have done. Now, this is an important instruction. So when you guys finish your fifth step, go somewhere where you can be alone. The first time I did it with Paris, he came over to my apartment and then he left, and I sat alone for an hour. The second time I did it with DJ, I had to drive somewhere, but I drove quietly in my car with no radio or anything. And I think it's quite important that we do spend this hour quietly without any noise. So get your husband or your wife and your kids, stay away from me for an hour, right? Because you just want to think. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. So if you do get down on your knees when you pray, get on your knees and thank God, right? If you don't kneel when you pray, you're sitting down, whatever. Just say, God, thank you for this experience, right? Because remember, we're telling this to another human being and to God. Then highlight the next 4 lines as well. And again, more instructions. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Okay? I know one guy who does this stuff verbatim. So he said, if you get home, put your book on a shelf that is at least chest high and pull it out, right? He says, I don't want to forget anything because it might be the thing that saves our lives, right? I don't go that literally on stuff like this, but he does. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, okay, just a different word for the steps. We ask if we have admitted anything. So between we ask and if, write God, right? We ask God if we have admitted anything. For we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Okay, so the arch that they're talking about is built out of the steps, and it's a personality transformation, right? And when we walk through that, we're not going to have the obsession to drink, do drugs, or sex, or food, or gambling, or shopping, or whatever it is, man. We're going to be free men and women. So we've got 4 questions here, and we're going to give a little translation like we did earlier. So put a 1 in front of is, and we're gonna write the translation down below. So write small. So is our work solid so far? So put a 1 down at the bottom of the page and just write, have I done my best? It's that simple. Have I done my best? By the way, when we ask God if we have omitted anything, if you think of anything, you remember, you call your sponsor up, right? I mean, that's the whole idea. We're sitting alone. Oh my God. Hello, Mr. Sponsor. I forgot that I stole a little bit of money from my last employer. Oh, really? How much did you steal? Well, $50,000. You forgot that, huh? So, I mean, if we remember anything, we're going to call them. And people have called me, and that's a wonderful feeling on both ends. So, if you remember something, call and get it out. Put a 2 in front of are the stones properly in place? And then put a 2 down below and write solid 1, 2, and 3 step. Solid 1, 2, and 3. And they're talking about the steps.
What are we looking for there?
Do we got step 1 down? We know that we are powerless over alcohol, right? That we cannot quit on our own power, and we cannot use. It's an untenable situation. Do we have step 1? Do we have step 2 down? Right? Do I believe, because I see it with my own eyes, I see all these people in AA who are worse than me. Do I believe that this can happen to me? Right? And the third step, have I decided that I'm going to try to let God and my sponsor run the show, right? Just to have a different employer rather than myself, right? So solid first, second, and third step. That's all. Do I think I've got it? Because if we don't take 1, we can't do 2. We don't do 2, we can't do 3. We don't do 3, we can't do 4. These things they're built in order. We don't do 5. We don't do 4. We can't do 5. We don't do 5. We cannot do 6 and 7. So solid 1, 2, and third step. Put a 3 in front of have. Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? So these, take them or leave them. They came from one of my sponsors. So write a 3 and write rigorous, honest, question mark. Rigorous honesty, question mark. That's one of them, cement into the foundation. Because, it kept telling us that if we're not honest, it ain't going to work. So rigorously honest, question mark, or rigorous honesty, however you want to phrase it. And then put a 4 in front of have. Have we tried to make mortar without sand? So for that one, put a 4 down below and write done prayer work, question mark. And I kind of think that 3 and 4 can be turned around, but have we been rigorous, honest through this? And are we praying throughout these steps? Because self cannot overcome self. So are we, if self could overcome self, we would be going, all of us, instead of being in AA, we would be we'd be buying self-help books, right? We wouldn't need to be here because the self-help book would have worked. So have we done our prayer work? Because this is a spiritual program. This is not, we're gonna train, your brain. I mean, we're gonna get your self-will working. No, this is a spiritual program. So have we tried to make mortar without sand? Have we asked God's help, done our prayer work, however you want to phrase it? So those are also 4 questions for sponsees and for yourself, right? And then somewhere off to the left we can write, faith replaces fear. Faith replaces fear. Somewhere in this process, a lot of the fears, you're going to get a little faith. You can say, my God, maybe this thing is going to work for me too. I didn't believe it would, but maybe it will, right? So faith replaces fear. Okay, that's it for the book. I still got a few notes. So remember, get your 12 and 12, and I'm going to read a few notes, and then I'm going to cover some of these optional receiver suggestions real quick. So again, into action. That means we take action. We don't think about it. And again, what I did was my top 10, had to get them out. 20-minute story of my life. I went through the sheets and I read my summaries, right? And my sponsor helped me see things I couldn't see, right? So we've been trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator. I did the very best I could working on my 4-step, but I had limited knowledge and experience. Even so, I did the best I could. But what I've got to do is take them to another person who has gone on before me and who has done the inventory according to the big book, right? And now this person who I'm giving my 4-step to is going to help me to glean more information out of each of the situations from my 4-step, right, that we're going to talk about. So, we got our sheets and we go, well, okay, Mr. Sponsor, I've been very resentful at my girlfriend. Why do I have it? How is that affecting me? And he's not going to maybe change the first or the second column, but he's going to change things around maybe in the 3rd column and possibly, and of course in the 4th column too. I'm going to say, well, I did that because of the sex instinct. You did not. You did that because you were trying to boost your self-esteem. So he's going to help me to see things, or that was plain old dishonesty. He's going to help me see things I can't see. It's very difficult for me to see the truth about myself, right? And to see my defects of character because of years and a lifetime of rationalization and justification of these attitudes. I could justify anything, man. So we need another human to look at me objectively and help me to see what I can't see. Because I'm starting out on a new lifetime engagement. This is a new life for me, and I need all the help I can get, man. So hopefully we're getting over that thing where we're afraid to ask for help or we don't think we need it. Because I want a successful life. I did the best I could on my inventory process, but a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. We need God and another human to help us see the truth. We need help because we've been leading a double life. We've been the world's greatest con artists, the world's greatest manipulators, and we're conning ourselves too. You cannot be a successful alcoholic, again, if you don't know how to lie, cheat, con, manipulate, steal, and do whatever is necessary. And we have a conscience, right? And we cannot live with ourselves if we really had to see the way that we're living. Right? What's going on? That's why when we do the 4-step, we can't sit on it. We've got to do the 5th step because we're going to see how we've been living and it could eat our lunch. That's why we've got to get this 5th step done right away. We use our resentments to transfer all blame to others so that we can live with ourselves. Very convenient. So we've been doing it for 5, 10, 20, some of us 30 years, right? Come to AA, take step 4. You're going to be just as honest as you can. But let's face it, we cannot be completely honest with ourselves. We need another human being who has walked this walk before, who has preferably done steps 4 through 9 according to the book. We have them help me see what I can't see. Again, hey, DJ, this was caused by my sex instinct. It was not, you idiot. You were trying to build your self-esteem. Can't you see it? Oh my God, I get it. Well, DJ, I did this because of my fear. No, you didn't. You did it because of your dishonesty. So he's going to help me see things that I can't see. Again, we're getting ready to start on a life-changing process. We need to be sure that we're going to try to change the right things, right, in step 6 and 7, so we can have peace of mind in the future. Remember, who was it? Carl Jung. He said emotions and attitudes, which were once the guiding force in the lives of these men, were suddenly cast aside, and they were replaced by new conceptions and motives, right? For us, and that's how people recovered, one out of a million before the steps. With us, we get that by doing the steps. So everybody can get that today. So when you pick a sponsor, do they know the program? If yes, they can help us. If not, it's just confession. And we need more than confession, right? Confession might keep us sober. That's good for the soul, but we need a little bit more. So I need to know, what am I going to ask for God's help to become willing to let loose in 6 and remove in 7? I need to know Him so I can work with God's help against these defects in my daily life. So again, it says right there, man, this one, Bill uses the stick. A lot of other things he's giving us promises, but in this one, we're not going to overcome drinking. Invariably, they get drunk. We will fail. That makes for more drinking. We won't live longer happily. We will continue to live in a nightmare, right? We will continue to be alone and isolated. We will continue to live a life of fear and anger, right? So, no, we don't want to do that. So all of a sudden, you look at the 5th step promises we get on page 75, and it gets rid of all that crap. Again, we're building an arch through which we walk to freedom. Step 1 is willingness. That's the foundation. Step 2 is belief. That's the cornerstone. Step 3, God is our director, or we're just going to go through with the rest of the steps. That's the keystone. We do this, we got 2 more stones in place. And I used to think that feelings were a barometer of my spiritual condition, right? But that's not true, because some days I don't feel good at all, right? I didn't feel very good this whole last week. My head was playing tricks on me. But you know what? Our spiritual condition is not, it's not how we feel, but rather it's based on what we do. It is based on what we do. Because at the end of the day, they're not going to say, little Johnny was feeling bad this day, right? They're going to say, John treated people with respect. When things were going crazy, he kept his mouth shut, and he worked for the greater good, right? We're going to see that we should not think too much or too little of ourselves. Some of us think that we're the worst people on earth. Some of us think we're the greatest people on earth, and they're both wrong. So we do the 5th step. We're going to see more readily when we make mistakes. We're going to perceive correctly. We're going to seek counsel. We're going to pray, and we're going to meditate. I had an instance today, right? An instance today where I left a note for poor Bassam. One of the guys, and it turns out he wasn't the guy that I should have left the note for, and it wasn't a good note. Somebody screwed up, right? And it cost me, 20 minutes of my valuable time. So, when I went to him and I said, hey, you know what, Bassam? I was wrong. He loved it. I said, I was wrong. And I just left it at that. I won't do it again. I'll be more careful next time. So we get to see these things, and we can clean up our mistakes quickly. So I had one guy that did the 5th step with me, and he called me up later that night in an all-out panic. He said, oh my God, after doing this, I think I'm the worst. He just thought he was the worst person ever, and he didn't think God was going to spend any time helping him out because he relived all the crap that he did. And I told him the same thing that my sponsor told me. God sees what you're trying to do here. You're trying to turn your life around so that you can be an honest, productive member of society and help other people. He sees that, and he wants you to succeed, right? And he called me back a day or two later and said, God, did he feel good? So this thing does work. So receiver suggestions. Optional receiver suggestions, right? Before the day, call the 5th step giver. This is like when you're going to be listening. Remind them to pray before coming. Bring the big book. Bring the question and answer envelopes. Bring all fourth step sheets, the summaries. Read one summary over the phone so you know that they're doing it right. No plans for later in the day. Keep it open. Take as long as you want because it's the opportunity of a lifetime. If it does go longer, so be it. Figure out where you're going to go for the hour. Bring a little food and beverages. One guy sets up a third chair for God. My sponsor lit a candle to symbolize the presence of God. Those are nice little tricks. We usually pray beforehand. You pray that you don't take on all your sponsee's problems. You guys can read this. I mean, these are some good things. And cover the clocks and watches. Have everything ready. It's okay, if the sponsor wants to take notes so he can come back to things, then that's okay. He's not writing down your secrets. Don't worry about it. He's just writing down something that he can come to later to show you things further. Know that it's okay to cry. Even if you're a guy, it's okay to cry, right? There's the candle thing. You let him know you're trustworthy. I always pray, when I'm about to hear one, I ask God for help so I can do the best job I can and see things that I can see that maybe He can't. And before we get started, anything you want to get off your chest? Okay, so yeah, I did that. I did my top 10 first. Then they tell the story, right? Be careful that we don't laugh when we're listening to it. It's serious stuff. We be gentle, spirit of trust. We always, if you're hearing it, we always share some of our own story if appropriate. My sponsor did that to me, particularly on the thing that I thought God was going to abandon me about. When he told me what he did that was even a little bit worse, we share the story, right? We watch the body language, we breathe, breathe. If you're anything like me, I didn't breathe for the first hour when I was given mine. These are just replies. I understand. I hear you. That's tough. These are just things that we can so that they understand that we're sympathizing and that we understand, right? Summaries, shortcoming, harms and shames. Now, these are questions, and I'll be honest. Go to that page 5 of 6. Some of these questions are above my pay grade, but apparently they're important. Any eating disorders. I hear this from all the great speakers too. We're supposed to ask if there's been any homosexual experiences because that's something that people will want to hide, right? Sex with animals. When I saw that, I said, "You got to be kidding me!" But I guess not. And it's okay. Have you ever had an abortion? Don't want to get political, but that really, some people think it's the most shameful thing ever, right? Victim of incest. And a lot of these things, I think if I hear some of these things, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, gosh, I'm going to recommend that they go see a psychiatrist or psychologist because some of these things, I might be, again, above my pay grade, right? And I know a lot of people that come into these rooms, men and women, have been sexually abused. I mean, there's no question about it, right? And we got to remember that there is no reason to feel shame because that happened to you. The other person was horribly spiritually sick and would have done it to anybody, right? So it's not your fault. That's one thing that we've got to understand. Raped, molested, or beaten. These are just our questions. To be honest with you, and I ask them all. If somebody says, "Yeah, I killed somebody," I don't know what I would do. I wouldn't know. Shoplifted or stolen, we've all done that, I think. Dealings with the occult. And basically, we just want to get all these secrets out on the table. And again, we can send somebody to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and if need be, a lawyer, right? And, we got to pray, right? We got to pray through this whole thing. And again, you may feel results either right away or later. For me, I think in most cases it's going to be later. And remember, no matter how good you feel, we've got 7 more steps after the 5th step. So, and they say, when you're all done, some people like to burn their 4th step. And I'm going to say, if you want to burn your 4th step, go ahead and do that, as long as you made a copy of it. Because we're going to need it for steps 8 and 9, and we're going to need it to refer back to. And again, when you're done, you let them know, go for that quiet hour, and always thank them. You're courageous. You've been searching for value in God. What's God in your life? A God to lean on. And again, you just know that God loves everybody. God does not see any of us as defective, and He wants all of us to succeed, be happy, and be able to help other people. So, and you can hug even if you're a guy. You can hug too. That's all right. I didn't like hugging people. I still don't, to be honest, but I do it. I'm getting better.
You're getting one
I'm getting
right.
better. I think that's everything. Oh, and obviously the questions, you do that after you're all done. I don't know if it's that important, but they were handed to me, so I hand them out. Anybody have any questions? Anything?
Have a good time next week.
All right. Yep. So get it 12 and 12, and we'll meet back in 2 weeks. So.
How often do you hear back from the sponsee that they've forgotten something?
I'd say about half the time.
Yeah.
Half the time, yeah. I mean, I've only heard like 5 5th steps, so I'm not,
Right.
Yeah. So, and I've given 2 and heard 5. So.
Yeah.
So. All right. Let's end.
When do we read this?
You read that after you've answered the questions.
Okay.
After you did the 5th step. So.
Okay.
Let's end with the 3rd step prayer. God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Peace.